we would like to invite you to a back to school series with BNT.
We are thrilled that you are the kind of teacher that is ready to go and dive into some practical and creative planning with us.
This mini series is going to take you through 5 days, 5 categories of prep, and about 5 minutes each, with inspiration to ensure your back to school season is fun, really fun for both you and your students, and also to set you up for a successful academic year ahead.
Head to bravenewteaching.com/back-to-school and you'll be ready to join us and look at classroom setup, community building, teacher meal prep, getting ready with us, and even our #1 first day of school lesson plan.
Again, that is bravenewteaching.com/back-to-school to make sure you don't miss any of it. We'll see you there. Well, hello and welcome back to Brave New Teaching, and welcome to our little early fall kind of author mini series that we have going on. We've got a couple of different author interviews that we decided to put together into a tiny little kind of back to school early fall mini series ish. And today is a very special interview actually, because I got to interview author James Ponti. He's a middle grades author, and I'm really excited for you to hear from him and hear him talk about his work. And the best part of today's interview is that I was joined by my own middle schooler. My son, Wyatt, came on and helped me interview Mr. Ponti. And it was really cool. First of all, being a teacher and hearing an author who writes to the middle grades audience, which is a very special group of readers, right? And then to have my son come in and just the brightness that came into James Ponti's voice when he started speaking to a reader, because my son has read some of his series and was so starstruck and excited to talk to a real life author, and not just a real life author, but a real life author whose work he has actually read. It was really cool. And I am excited for you to hear just the joy come through in both of their voices of talking to a hero and talking to a kid who thinks you're a hero. It was just so cool. James Ponti is a New York Times and USA Today bestselling author of 4 middle grade book series. He has written a couple of really well-known series like City Spies and the Sherlock Society, which is up and coming. His novels have been named to 45 state award lists and translated into a dozen languages. He's a 2-time Edgar Award nominee, winning in 2018 for Vanished, which is one of my son's favorite series he's ever read. He currently lives with his family in Orlando, Florida. We talk about all sorts of things, going to New York, watching musicals on Broadway. We talked about reading books. We talked about being students ourselves and finding yourselves in the stories that you read to get lost in. And it was just a wonderful conversation, and I'm really excited for you to hear it. So with no further ado, cue the music.
You're listening to Brave New Teaching, and we are so much more than a podcast.
We give teachers the inspiration, support, and tools to challenge the status quo.
I'm Amanda, and I'm a former English teacher from Illinois.
And I'm Marie, and I'm a teacher from Southern California.
Join us at bravenewteaching.com to find out more about our courses, festivals, and get every episode's show notes.
We're so glad you're here. Enjoy the show.
All right, everybody. We are very excited to welcome to the podcast author James Ponti, who is quite a popular name in my house with my middle grades reader especially. Got very excited when I told him who I was interviewing today. And so, James, welcome to the Brave New Teaching podcast. Would you please take a moment to tell us a little bit about yourself, what brings you here today, and spoiler alert, everybody, he's married to a high school teacher. So I'm going to be asking some questions about that.
That's not the spoil. That's the main thing. The high school teacher wife is the key to everything for me. My mom was an art teacher. My son works in the education department at zoos. My daughter-in-law is a high school art teacher. My brothers were both college professors. Their wives were teachers. I'm the black sheep of the family. I'm the only non-educator in the family. So no, I love teaching. And so when I got the chance to be part of this, I was very excited because this is right up to what we talk about at home all the time. I am not a teacher. I'm a writer. I had an amazing 5th grade teacher who I had always liked writing and kind of got it into my head that that's what I was going to be. And from 5th grade on, I never wanted to be anything else. And I wrote television, I wrote magazines, I did newspapers. I've done all kinds of writing, but I've really found my happiest place. I really enjoyed writing television. That's what I went to college to learn how to do. But I've really been at my happiest writing books. And I've been writing middle grade fiction for, we'll say, the last 12 years or so. I've had, I'm losing track of the books because the number I've written versus the number that have come out. But
Yeah, I can imagine.
I think Sherlock Society is book number 12 coming out, and I have two more next year, so we'll be up to 14 pretty quick. So yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Well, and what I love the most, honestly, about your books is the series aspect of it. And I, as a drama teacher and as I did my master's in theater and film studies, I can see that almost episodic writing of.
It's the way I most naturally write. So I started off at Disney Channel, Nickelodeon, and then I did some stuff for I wrote for PBS, I wrote Clifford for a long time. And episodic stories to me are the way my brain kind of works. But there's a really funny thing going on right now in middle grade fiction. And if you look at middle grade and young adult, I'll just throw some names out there. Stuart Gibbs, who writes Spy School, Max Brallier, who writes Last Kids on Earth, Susan Collins, who writes The Hunger Games, Shannon Messenger, who writes Keeper of the Lost Cities, Victoria Aveyard, who writes the Red Queen series. All of us started off as script writers, and then moved into, and I think there's tons. The list goes on, and I think it's because we write at a pace that moves faster and is episodic, but hopefully is episodic with not. Sometimes you'll see something like they'll take a book and they'll turn it into a 6-part series on a streaming service. And the episodic nature sometimes can be frustrating because it's like, well, they just paused the story.
Right.
When you do, they should each be their own unique story that then links on with others. So hopefully my books do that.
No, it does feel that way. And it's also that pace is what makes it feel so addicting in such a good way that gets kids. I mean, my kid, I'll even just speak as a mom. My kid is a reader, but he also has this preteen block where if there's anything that's being encouraged of him, he automatically has to say no to it, right?
Of course. Yes, of course.
And yet, when he picked up Framed, he didn't put it down. He read it very, very quickly because he just got, you just get drawn in to the stories, and I can tell as a teacher, then putting my teacher hat back on, that you have those conversations with the teachers in your family and that you are constantly talking about education and kids because it feels authentic to the way that kids want their own stories told. The characters don't feel like caricatures of kids. They feel like kids.
I hate that when I read that. I hate, and I am by no way saying, oh, my books are great or whatever. But what I aspire to and what I like in the books that I read, because I read a lot of books written by my friends who are amazing middle grade fiction authors. And like when they don't talk down to kids, because I feel like that's the first mistake.
Yeah.
The plots in my spy books, and City Spies, the plot in Sherlock Society, they are not easy. And I don't mean that, but complicated doesn't have to be dense or unattainable.
Right.
But they're complex still because kids can handle complex. Sometimes you just need to give them a chance to recap, and keep up with it. There are certain telltale signs when I read something, or sometimes you watch a movie and it's like, this is someone's vision of what it was like to be a kid that couldn't have been theirs because no kid has ever been this smart in that way or this out of touch with reality,
right.
Or and I don't think kids want to read that. We talk a lot about representation, and one of the things we want to represent is like normal kid behavior, not like this idealized version of childhood where everything is either horrible, like Charles Dickens, or it's just Pollyanna. And it's like kids' lives are messy and they make mistakes and they feel bad sometimes about things they do because they don't understand why they treat people the way they do. And we're hopefully trying to get at that in the books that I feel like we're in a sort of a golden age of middle grade. There's just so many good books out there. And I feel like a lot of that is because we're not writing down to kids.
You're not writing down to kids, and you're I think you just hit the nail on the head. You're writing in a way that this very specific age group, I was just chatting with a friend yesterday who his youngest is the same age as my oldest and they're best friends. And his oldest is going to high school next year. And I looked at him and I was like, so 11 years old, huh? Like you guys couldn't warn me about what 11 years old was going to be like in children, huh? That's interesting. Yeah. It's such a unique part of life. And having never taught middle school, it's something that I haven't really experienced this age group since I was that age group. They are so complex and complicated. And like you were saying, just because the story is multi-layered doesn't mean it's not accessible for a kid. You just need to give them the string that they can hold on to the whole time, right? Because their lives are that messy. They do not know why they say half the things that they say. And being able to see that reflected in a character who then goes through it, deals with it, and recovers and is still like successful, whatever that means for the story or for the character. It seems so simple, but it's so important for kids of all ages to see recovery, but especially like not just in somebody older than them to be like, oh, well, they get it because they're older. This is somebody who's my age, who I'm reading about, who feels authentic to me, right? And then they can make a big, huge mistake and like... Like even in the very beginning of your new book, the Sherlock Society, which we're going to start talking about in a minute, like they make some really big mistakes.
Really big mistakes.
And they're heavy mistakes. And then they can recover or they can at least figure out how to work through and not ignore the uncomfortable parts. And that's something that I think is so just invaluable for people of all ages, but especially this specific age to be looking at. And it rings true and it comes through really authentically, which I think is really nice.
There's that well-known parable about the man in the hole and person in the hole, and someone's in a hole and they can't get out. They're on the side of the street and they ask for help and people say, I can't help. Mm-hmm. Or they do faint help. You know, well, here's an instruction man. And then he sees his friend and he calls his friend and he says, oh, can you help me get out? And the friend just jumps in the hole and he goes, yeah. You know, what are you thinking? Now we're both in here. He goes, that's okay because I've been in here and I know the way out. And I feel like that's what we do when we write middle grade. We're all writing from the pain of our middle grade experience. We're all writing from our struggles and our triumphs and our lessons, but from that place where it hurts. And it's kind of, I think, the way of a lot of us who do this for a living. We're trying to show people there's a way out of this. You know, my son's middle school experience was not great. And we lived 2 blocks from the school. And so it was kind of like this constant visual reminder.
I'm sure it was just looming over the poor guy. Right? Yeah.
And as they do with schools now, for whatever reason it seems, they decided to tear that school down and build a new school in the exact same spot, right? So they tore it down. And it was actually a really therapeutic thing. One day we were driving home and I just pulled into the parking lot. My son visibly started shaking a bit. And I'm like, no, but I want you to look at something. I go, look, the school has been torn down. You're still here. You outlasted the entire school. You're going to outlast these problems as they come up. You're going to beat these problems as they come up. And I know it's hard because you don't know that the way that I know that because I've been through that. And that's really what we're trying to do with these books. And when we talk about the books this way, sometimes it'd be, it's an after school special about how I dealt with this and that's also not a book that I'm interested in writing. There are people who write books like that. They're excellent. But it's like, no, this is going to be the fun of life with that mess mixed in because they are intrinsically linked. So we're going to go on an adventure and we're going to solve a mystery and we're going to be best friends and we're going to say things that upset each other and we're going to not talk for a while and we're going to think we have the perfect answer and we're going to fall on our face because that's what that life is like.
And that I think is, what did you say? It's the golden age
now,
right now, right?
I think it's a really strong era. I think there's just so much good out there.
Well, and that you can have a perfectly flawed character that is so accessible and easy to connect with. Even as like a grown teacher and mom, I can connect with these characters and they're so endearing to me. Let's dive in actually a little bit to the Sherlock Society. Will you tell me a little bit about where this book came from and like why this series, why now?
So I got to back into my career a little bit here. I was a television writer and I did that. And then I became a TV producer, which sounds like a bigger deal than it is, but I made like cable documentary shows. And first I will interrupt. Hey, how you doing there, buddy?
Oh, yep. Sorry, everybody. Brief interruption. My resident 11-year-old has just entered the room because he's very excited to meet Mr. Ponti.
Hey, how are you? What's your name?
I'm Wyatt.
So what kind of books do you like to read, Wyatt?
Yours?
Oh, well, that's very nice. What else do you read besides me?
I really like historical fiction and like realistic fiction.
That's really good. I really like that too. And you're going to go into middle school next year, is that right?
Yeah.
Are you excited about that, scared about that, or both?
All above.
Yeah, all above. So what's a book of mine that you've read?
Right now I'm reading the Frame series.
Okay. And so are you on the first book? Are you reading Frame?
I'm reading Vanished.
That's the second one, right? Yes, the second one. I lose track in my head, yes.
Hey, listen, he's so used to it. Where I'm like, who are you? And he's like, you only have 2 children. And I'm like, and you are?
Yeah. What is it you like about the Frame series?
It's just really, how do you say it? Like,
You told me you were kind of like, you couldn't put it down.
yeah, I couldn't put it down. That's what I meant.
You know, so this is part of an answer I'm about to give your mom. But the thing for me is mysteries are the most fun books to me because they're the one kind of book that asks you as a reader to participate in the story. Where other books you observe. So you'll read a story, oh, that's really interesting. Oh, that's really interesting. But the idea of a mystery is, no, wait, I'm supposed to solve it. Can I solve it faster than Florian can solve it? Can I solve it faster than Margaret can solve it? And that's the reason I start the books at the moment where Florian figures it out. So all the books, they'll start that first chapter and he'll go, wait a minute, that changes everything. Because I want you as the reader to know, okay, that tattoo is the single most important clue in the book. So I've given you a hint. Okay, look for why. But I also know that I'm going to make that so not obvious to find. I don't worry about spilling the beans at the beginning, but you know what to look for, kind of thing. And I feel like that's why I am a poor reader. I always have struggled at reading. I like it a lot now, and I do it more often. But when I was a kid, I didn't read at all, except for a couple mystery books. And the mystery books hooked me because I had to keep reading because I had to find out the answer to the puzzle. And that was really fun. Yeah. So you live in San Diego area, in Poway, right?
Yeah.
What a fun place to live. Do you like, are you into sports? Do you like the Padres, or do you don't care about them?
We just went to a Padres game on Monday, but other than that, not much.
What are you into? Tell them what you're into.
I'm into theater, mostly.
You're into theater? What kind of theater do you like?
Just all
musical.
So here's
Yeah.
my wife is addicted to Broadway.
Yep.
Yeah.
So every year we make 2 trips and we see 4 shows in 3 days or 5 shows in 4 days. And so we just came back like a week ago or 2 weeks ago. So when we watched the Tonys,
Yeah.
this year, I don't know if you watched the Tony, we had seen all the winners perform, all the performers except for 2.
That is so cool.
Yeah, we love it. So I'm really into theater too. I was a film major in school.
You've just explained our dream trip coming up. Like, that is what we want to do.
It is so much fun. This is literally our trip. We go to New York. We go to probably at least 4 or 5 bookstores. We go to 4 or 5 Broadway shows. I visit my editor. We go out to lunch. So this trip, my lunch dates were Chris Grabenstein, who wrote Limoncello's Library, Karina Glazer, who wrote The Vanderbeekers, 141st Street, and Allison Gerber, who's written a bunch of stuff that's a little older than you, I think. And it's like every trip, it's just every meal is an author, every show, it's just, and then we do at least 3 art museums. And that for us is the perfect trip.
That also sounds like the perfect trip for us.
Yeah. I mean, it's just really, and that's the advantage of living on the East Coast.
Yeah.
Like, because we can fly up, we can take a flight that's not even that early. Like, we can leave at like 10 and we're there. We have lunch there and we see a show that afternoon or that. Yeah, it's nice.
That's so cool.
But I'm glad that you're into theater. Theater is a very cool thing to be into. So I majored in film. I love to write, but what I love about theater, what I love about film is that they are arts that are collaborative. And that's a really fun thing, because it's not just you. It's a team of people that you're doing this stuff with. So,
Yeah.
So are you going to hang out while we do this podcast, or you got something fun to do in the other room?
You want to stay with us?
Yeah.
Okay.
Tell us about the Sherlock Society. What was the inspiration behind this novel?
What a great question. You are a natural podcaster. So I really like mysteries. I like mysteries because when you do a mystery as a reader, you get to play along and try to solve the mystery. And when you do a mystery as a writer, you get to play along with people that you don't even know yet. You get to say, okay, I'm going to put this clue here, and this clue is you're going to, like, if I do it right, you're going to think it means this, and it really means that, And like, for instance, well, most people won't have read Framed, but when you read Framed, I knew what that tattoo meant all along. And I was able to do all kinds of stuff because I knew I was going to go back to that.
Yeah.
So with the Sherlock Society, I do City Spies, comes out every year. Every February, a new City Spies book comes out. And it's a spy series. It's so much fun to write. But I used to work in TV, and I decided I was going to not work in TV at all. And since I thought I was going to have so much extra time, I'll write 2 books a year. This seemed like such a good idea at the time.
That's
It has been a very busy idea. But I thought, what's a good book to write? And so I write from the front of my house. I have a room surrounded by windows, and I see people walking by all day, and it's very nice. I live by a couple lakes, and so I walked out to a lake, and there's benches all around the lake. And I told myself, I cannot go back home until I've come up with my new book idea. And so I go to a bench and ask a question. And I can't get up from the bench until I've given a good answer to the question. And I have a question at every bench. So I start off, well, what kind of book do you want to write? Okay, I want to write a mystery. I want to write just a straightforward mystery. So I got up, went to the next bench. Where do you want this book to take place? Well, it'd be nice to write about Florida. I've grown up in Florida. I've lived almost my entire life here. I grew up at the beach. So we're going to do Florida. I just kept going around, and I had to stop at every bench. And the questions got harder and harder and harder. And after 2 laps around, I had this idea. And actually, I was sitting at the bench, and I came up with an opening paragraph that is almost verbatim the opening of the book. And that is, if our last name was Baker, we would have sold cupcakes. If our last name was Walker, we would have taken care of people's pets while they were on vacation. But our last name's Sherlock, so detective agency just seemed like the thing to do. Or starting a detective agency seemed like the thing to do. And I thought, I can get it behind that. But there's one big problem I still had. All right, so I wanted it in Miami. I wanted it with these kids. I thought I wanted 4 kids to be in the story. But how do they get around, right? Now, in Framed, what I did is I put them in Washington, D.C., and there's a subway there. In Dead City, which was the first series I wrote, they were in New York, and there's a subway there. So, you can get around. Kids can use the subway. Miami doesn't have good mass transportation. How do they get around? So I had to go to another bench, and I came up with Grandpa. And Grandpa is the character who drives them around. And it's like, well, instead of just having him drive them around, he should really be a partner in this. And I thought, what if Grandpa used to be an investigative reporter for the Miami Herald? And he has a storage space filled with interviews and audio tapes and newspaper clippings and all kinds of research for all these different stories. And they start researching and trying to solve the stories he couldn't solve during his career. And that became the book. And it's so much fun to write.
Isn't that cool?
And researched it a lot and worked on it a lot. But that's the book.
Wow.
That's pretty cool, huh?
Yeah, that's a really cool process that you do into making the story.
You do not sound like a person who's not yet been to middle school. The process and all like that. That's very good. No, it's so earlier today you said you like drama.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things, because I was a script writer, I never did plays. I wrote one play in middle school that we performed for my school, which was a very big deal for me.
Yeah, that's really
But I was never really big into, I never had a professional dramatic work. But I wrote a lot of scripts. And one of the things that I do when I'm writing a book is I want it to sound a certain way. And a trick that I had learned when I used to write scripts for Nickelodeon was it's important to read the scripts out loud. And then you hear it. And sometimes that helps you catch grammar, which is important. But more often than not, it helps you catch when people talk in a way that real people don't talk. And so that's the thing that's like in drama that you can deal with. So I read everything that I write over and over and over out loud all the time, constantly. In our old house, when my son was in middle school, his bedroom was right next to the room where I wrote. And I usually did my writing late at night. And he said that, like he'd wake up at 3 a.m. and he'd hear me doing framed out loud, the characters from the book or something like that. And it just really helps me. And I'm always very interested to hear the audiobooks. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that I always do is I buy the audiobook of my book the morning it comes out, and I listen to it that week while I'm on the book tour. I just listen to it when I fly from place to place. And I could get it free, but it usually doesn't come free to me until that afternoon. And I want to start. Yeah. That's now become my thing. I want to start in the morning. So at like 5 a.m., I'm heading to the airport to fly to Atlanta or Miami or wherever the book tour starts. I listen to that tape so I can hear someone other than me read it out loud.
Actually, that's one of the, not even with creative writing, with like argumentative writing. So I teach mostly 11th grade English when I'm teaching English to like 10th and 11th grade right now. And every single time I'm like, read your literary analysis paper out loud. That is what's going to unlock the pieces of your brain that are filling in the gaps that you can't see because you have to hear them. So it's very glad that a professional author is telling me that.
My 11th grade English teacher was Judith Wyatt. She's amazing. She was amazing. She's passed away. She was by far the hardest teacher I ever had. My grades in her class were some of the lowest that I made, and I love her so much. To this day, every book I write, the teacher's name is Miss White.
I love that.
So she's been in like a dozen books. Until the other day, I got a note from a copy editor. Wait a minute, Mrs. White was the teacher at this school. Now she's at this school. I'm like, there's a Miss White at every school in the world as far as I'm concerned. She just challenged me so hard. And yeah, I struggled as a reader. So the literary analysis sometimes were not as good as they could be, but she was always so supportive of my writing. And I made the very smart decision. It was kind of by chance, but I sat in the front seat because I knew I wasn't a strong reader. I thought I need no distractions. She had a podium, and I sat so I was 4 feet from her, and I just focused on her. And it was funny because she was like a Hobbit-sized teacher, but when she'd crawl up behind her podium, she was imposing up there, and she was just great. And my very first book that I wrote, which was a nonfiction book about movies, I was able to give her a copy of that before she passed away, and I wrote in it that I never could have written this without you, and she cried, but it was, I cried too. It was a cry kind of moment. Yeah. But my 11th grade, I had 3 key English teachers along the way: Mr. Prothero in 5th grade, Mr. Tyree in 7th, 8th, and 9th, and Miss White in 11th, that I owe so much to. It's one of the reasons why I try to do as much as I can for teachers, because they pushed me and they encouraged me. And what was really great, and to be honest, I don't know that you can do this anymore, is they went out of their way to find ways, in addition to school, to help me grow as a writer. So in Mr. Tyree's class in middle school, he loved movies and I loved movies. One of the things I loved about movies was, one thing I loved is there was air conditioning. My house didn't have air conditioning until I was 13. And so I'd go to the movies in the summer, and sometimes I just watch them twice. But I really fell in love with movies, and he loved movies. And every year in his class, we wrote a movie, or we produced a movie. And every year I wrote the movie for my class, and I got hooked. And I think it was the last year I was in 9th grade, because we didn't have middle school, we had junior high. So 7th, 8th, and 9th. And I told him, I said, Mr. Tyree, I know I want to be a writer, and I've never known what I want to write, but I think this is it. I think maybe wanting to write scripts for TVs or movies, and then I just kind of added on there, or plays, would be a great thing to do. And he did not hesitate. He said, write a play and we'll produce it for the school. Like, he didn't ask the principal, he didn't ask my mom. He said, write a play and we'll produce it, James. He didn't say it had to be good.
Just had to do it.
And I worked on that play every day, all the time. And we produced it, and it was bad, but it was stupid funny. It was about Santa's sleigh being taken by terrorists. It's like, oh my goodness, like everything. This was produced in in a public school, middle school is like the most amazing thing. And he never once said, well, maybe you want to change that. He goes, no. And it was all just jokes. It was all just bad humor, like those old movies like Airplane or whatever. It's like, it was just like, and we did it. And I sat in the wings and all day as all these kids who I'd grown up my whole life with. And they came and they sat and they watched this thing that I wrote and they laughed at these terrible jokes. And I thought, wow, okay, I could do this. And hearing it out loud, hearing the performance of it. So people ask all the time, they go, you've gone from television now to books. And I feel like I have a couple of decent plays in me, I'm going to be honest. How did you make that jump? And it's like, I don't feel like it's as big a jump as you maybe think it is. I did documentaries for a long time. And one of the things that I would do with a documentary, say I was going to go to shoot a documentary at the San Diego Zoo. You'd go to the zoo and you'd figure out, okay, well, we're going to shoot the entrance so people know where we are. We're going to do some fast cuts of all the different animals. And where should we interview the person? Oh, we want to interview them maybe in Big Cat Alley. And then we can set a camera here. And then we have all the big cats in the background. And that'd be a good thing. And you'd find like 3 locations. I do that with the books that I write. You read Frame. Frame takes place at the National Gallery of Art. I went to the National Gallery of Art. I went to the rooms where they were. I imagined, where would I put a camera? Even though I'm not going to use a camera, where would I put a camera to shoot this scene? Well, that's where I should put the reader, in that same spot. And how do I establish where we are? Well, you got to show the entrance. You got to show the halls. And I went to the train station in Edinburgh and walked through the train station for the scenes there. For the opening of the Sherlock Society, it opens with a rescue of the Marine Patrol in Miami, and they need to be rescued from Biscayne Bay. So I went to the Marine Patrol, and I was just wanting to look at the offices so I could write the office right. And they said, no, we're going on the boat. And they threw me. I had a writer friend with me on the SWAT boat, and we just raced through Biscayne Bay.
So cool.
And I kept imagining, where would the camera go? Because that's where the reader wants to be. The reader wants to see what you're seeing. How does the dialogue sound? Oh, you know what? When we're racing fast in the boat, we have to raise our voice to be heard over the engine. Oh, and we're getting spray on our face. Oh, and all that stuff becomes part of the book.
Yeah, all of those little sensory details really do come through, and the reader can see it like a picture frame or like a frame of a film. Yeah. Okay, you said you had a question, Wyatt?
Yeah, I have a question. Are any of your books, do you think, going to make it into a movie?
Well, City Spies, MGM, who produces the James Bond spy movies, purchased the book because they said, well, we feel like we're the spy studio. So they are developing it. I don't know, I try to keep my fingers crossed it'll happen. I don't know, but there's a producer and there's a screenwriter, and I've talked to the screenwriter a couple times, and they're moving along, and so maybe so. So there's that chance.
That's pretty cool.
And there's been talk about Framed and maybe a television show, which would be great because I have a TV background. But all that is, I can only focus on the parts that I can control. And right now that's the writing of the books. And so I do that. And I don't even get my hopes up about those other things, but I do address them. And, and when we talk and have meetings, we have serious meetings. And so that part's really good. So that would be great fun. But if that never happens, I am thrilled that I've gotten to write. But I can't believe that I get to do this. I can't believe how many books I've gotten to write and that they get published and that people actually read them. It stuns me when I meet someone who's actually read one of the books. I'm like, really? It's just because it doesn't seem like a thing that would happen.
It's so interesting to hear you say that because you're such a talented writer. And like we were saying even before Wyatt got in here, I was saying how accessible your characters are and how authentic and real they feel to like actual kids, like the one sitting next to me.
Hello.
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 And so I think it's so important though to hear like you are objectively very successful. And yet for even you to go, but people are like reading my work. It shows how much you enjoy what you do. And it shows how much like your passion for storytelling comes through, which sounds cliche, but it's true. Like telling stories and connecting with people is such a rich
it's my most favorite thing.
Yeah, it's so cool.
I have a really good friend whose name is Christina Suntornvat. And Christina has won in the last 4 years 3 Newbery Honors. She won one for A Wish in the Dark. She won one for All 13. And she won one for The Last Mapmaker. It is a legendary level of achievement as a writer. 2 of those in 1 year, which has only happened 3 times in history. She and I often talk about our imposter syndrome and how we think, like, are people going to find out that we're not good enough? And I'm like, Christina, you're good enough. You have, there's no, and I have a theory, people talk about imposter syndrome. And I think sometimes people talk about it disingenuously, where they're trying to act humble. And, I know I can write a book. I feel like I can write a solid book. Whether people are going to like it or not becomes a different thing. Whether it's really good, I don't know that, but, I know that I can do certain parts. But when we read a book or when we see a movie or we go to a play, you go see Hamilton and it's magic.
Yeah.
It's just transcendent magic. Or you go see, I remember when I was a kid and I went to see Back to the Future. And it just, my friend and I in the car talked for like 2 hours about this, how this movie was just amazing. Or when I saw Raiders of the Lost Ark and it just turned my world upside down. And there's magic to that.
Yeah.
And what you don't see when you see the finished product is the work that went into it. You don't see how long they worked on Back to the Future. You don't see that Lin-Manuel Miranda spent 2 years writing just the first 2 songs in Hamilton, right? And grinding away at it. You see the end product. And so what happens is when you're working on something, when you're writing a book, all you see is the work.
Yeah.
All you see is, oh my goodness, I did that chapter 20 times and it still feels not quite there for me. And I think that's why we feel like we're imposters, because it feels like we're in a magic show and everyone else is doing like real Harry Potter magic and we're doing like stuff you buy at a box at the store, like, bad card tricks. But, that's the funny thing about magic. If a magician ever shows you how a trick works, it's so disappointing. There's never a time when I've ever seen a trick explained where I wasn't like, that's it? And it's all the presentation that makes it seem magical. And I feel the same way about writing sometimes. It's just like, I sit at the same place I'm at now for hours on end. Every day I write, weekends too. I usually write at night too, because I foolishly agreed to do 2 books a year. And it doesn't feel like magic at all. So I think that's where the imposter part comes in. And when I'm truly, genuinely delighted to hear people like the book, that's more, I think, just the appreciative fact of, I know as a kid, it was hard for me to read a book. It was hard for me to get from the start to the finish of a book. And when a kid tells me they do it, I just feel like, wow, what a commitment and honor it is for me that they took as much time as that takes. I know some read faster than others, but it's a commitment. I've given you 300, maybe 400 pages, and you've gotten through that. And that, it takes my breath away every time.
Speaking of books, I have a question. So for the Sherlock Society, before I ask you specifically about what sorts of cool things that you have for schools and classrooms and libraries, those sorts of resources, if you were to curate a list of books that maybe were a thematic grouping, we talk a lot on the podcast specifically about units of study that are created with student choice in mind, that are thematic. So whether it's short stories, poetry, a list of novels, what are maybe a few titles that you might pair with the Sherlock Society that teachers could look at? Or maybe not titles, but maybe authors that they could look to that could thematically link with like specifically this type of a mystery. I know that's a very specific question. Put you on the spot question.
No, that's my problem is I have too many to give you. So
that is the best type of an answer.
Top 5.
Yeah.
There is a lot of concern in the world of middle grade fiction that fewer kids are reading, and the number of middle grade books that are doing well is lessening. And those are business things, I understand it. But one of the things they found in there, that a spark that is truly doing well, is joy. Books with joy. Things in we live in a, we've been through so much these last like 5-6 years with health and this and all kinds that kids really like joyful things, even with serious stories. And one of the things that I think that we need to tap into better on our side is the joy that we have in writing and the joy that we have in each other. So, for example, I am part of a text chain and a pretty much weekly Zoom group with 10 authors who are amazing. Stu Gibbs, who writes Spy School, Gordon Corman, Christina Suntorvat, Karina Young-Glazer, Sarah Mlanovsky, Julie Buxbaum, Alison Gerber, leaving people off. I shouldn't. Plus, I have other friends, Christina Diaz-Gonzalez, Chris Grabenstein. They're not like just people who I know their books. They're people who I see regularly, who I talk to all the time. I have a thing right now, because in promotion for the Sherlock Society, I have taken around a group of Sherlock hats, all right? These deerstalker hats. And wherever I've gone for the last year, I've had them with me. And I've had authors pose wearing them. I wasn't even sure what I was going to do with this. And not a single author didn't do it. They're so goofy. We're talking Raina Telgemeier, Jeff Kinney, the Angie Thomas, these huge Jen Lynn Barnes authors. And it's all because it's a real joyful thing that we do. And it is a real joyful friendship that we share with each other, and one that we really want young readers to know is like their friendships. We have the goofy parts and the silly parts, and I can't believe we did that part. I used to write mysteries on a TV show, and the woman I wrote with, someone broke into our office one night, and we tried to solve it like we were actual detectives, and we couldn't solve it at all. And the security department's like, go back to doing what you do. You're not detectives. But we have this goofy idea. So I know tons of writers who write great mysteries. So I'm just going to start listing off some. I just listed some. Stuart Gibbs, you can't go wrong with Spy School, Charlie Thorne, Fun Jungle, great mysteries all the way around. I want to hit on two new ones coming out. They're coming out. We have Jasmine Warga has one called A Strange Thing Happened in Cherry Hall, which is a museum art crime mystery, which I'm always very partial to. Ruta Sepetys and Steve Shankin have co-written a book called The Bletchley Riddle. That's amazing, and it's going to win every award next year, I think. Great mystery story. Beth McMullen writes great spy stuff. I do a lot of spy stuff, so I think in that terms, that's a great start.
That's great. So we actually got to.
Was that last summer that we went to see Ruta Sepetys speak?
It was very cool. She wrote her book about writing. The story, and she was on tour, and we got to go and see her speak. It was I took him with me.
Sometimes I'll go and I'll see these people talk. These people who are my friends or good acquaintances or whatever. And then sometimes you get someone like Ruta or, oh my goodness, Brian Selznick, where they talk, and after an hour you go, I am not in their league in any way whatsoever. This is this whole thing. Jason Reynolds is that way. Jason's awesome. And when he talks, it's just inspiring. But it's just, but it's such a great crowd. Being part of that camaraderie, being part of that cohort is maybe the biggest surprise, wonderful surprise of this career.
That is so cool to hear too.
Is that it's not just because the one fear I had coming from television to books is television, you are surrounded by people and you're out. And when I was producing, I was out and I had a lot of people expecting me to tell them what to do. And I thought, boy, it's going to be lonely sitting in that room writing. And sometimes it is, but it's not nearly as lonely because you've got that. And, Lori Halse Anderson, I told this story a lot, but she tells me I tell it wrong because someone told her, and I can never remember that person's name. So I always just give credit to Lori. But the first time I met Lori, and Lori is a hugely amazing author, and we were at a couple of events back to back. Children's Institute and ALA were back to back, and she was kind of like my big sister on the trip in the sense that she had done this and I hadn't done it. So basically, follow Lori's lead, right? Because we both have the same publisher. And she said to me right off the bat, first thing, she goes, James, the first thing you've got to understand is this. We are not competitors. We are co-conspirators.
Mm-hmm.
And it just tilted everything for me in the best way possible. I don't know of many other businesses where the people who in theory are your competitors are actually your biggest allies and supporters. You see it when you see the blurbs on books.
It's true.
Oh, so-and-so says, write this book. The San Diego Padres say, watch the Chicago Cubs. So they want you to watch the San Diego Padres, right? It's like, no, we constantly do that. We constantly say, I formed a group, and you can go online, and I'll be honest, I haven't updated the website much lately, but it's still an amazing group. It's called the Renegades of Middle Grade, and it's 40 authors that I just think are amazing. And the idea being, if you like any one of us, you'll like the other 39.
That's cool. And what a great resource, too. Yeah.
It is really a great starting place. If you have a student who doesn't know what they like, maybe they know, like maybe they read Spy School and they like that. Go on that list, and you can't go wrong.
That's so cool.
And it's the most ridiculous name of all time, the Renegades of Middle Grade, because we are so not renegades.
Okay, go.
We
you
are.
Know what? Just
we
fly
are
that flag.
milkshake drinking, boring, stay up all night talking about nouns and gerunds
But
kind
I
of
like
people.
it.
But
You're in good company here.
Although that said, we do sometimes have a thing called middle grade dance party at events. And you have not lived until you've seen Gordon Corman dance in the 80s hits. I mean, the man has got it. Awesome, right? He is solid, good dancer.
Okay, I want to ask you about your resources that you have for teachers and for schools. So what sorts of resources do you have? Your website, first of all, is chock full of amazing things from your various series. What you were just telling me before we started recording of something that you're going to be talking about today.
Okay, so very early on, my wife gave me a couple of rules. She says, you have to make things for teachers. They have to be free, and they have to be done. Not like, oh, here's an activity you could create. It has to be, here's the thing that all you have to do is press print. Because she's a teacher, and she wants that. So I have always made that kind of my mantra going through. And one of the great things is Simon & Schuster has been great about going on board with me. So, for instance, everything that we've ever created for the City Spies series, there's a website where Simon & Schuster has it, and you can go, and it's the Classroom Dossier, and it's down. And I just talked to librarians and teachers. What would you like? And one librarian told me, I like to make a PowerPoint, and it took forever to find things for so we made the base plates for all the PowerPoints. So if you want to do a PowerPoint, it's got the characters in the corners. It's got that. Interviews, videos, all kinds of things. I used to work in television, so I go and I make videos about all the places in all the books. So I put together videos for those. Those are all on my website. So I'm always trying to figure out ways to come up with things for teachers. I was a little nervous because Sherlock Society is coming out the day after Labor Day. Mm-hmm. I thought that's the start of the school year. For some people, it's not even the start of the school year. And I thought, well, I want to make sure that the teachers don't forget about it. The librarians don't forget about me over the summer. But then it gave me an idea that I really like, which was, well, in the book, the Sherlock Society starts as a club in the school library. And so what I wanted to do is create a way that school libraries could join. And they could become like different chapters of the Sherlock Society. I didn't know if people would do this or not. And so I spread the word at a couple conferences and stuff. And so we have over 500 members already. And so Simon & Schuster has gotten in with it to me. There's going to be a separate site, too, of all the stuff for Simon & Schuster. But they're making certificates so the library can have a certificate on the wall. I am doing unique individual Zoom conversations that are only for people in that club. So my first one will be with the editor of the book, and it'll be the two of us talking about how an editor and a writer work together to go from idea to the finished book and all the things that we do together. Another one will be with some of my writer friends, and we'll talk about how we do the books together. And then for this, again, the libraries that join, I'm writing an escape room for your library.
That's so cool.
Because there's an escape room in the book, and I thought it'd be fun to do. So working on that. And I do all this stuff pretty much on my own, so sometimes it's a little slow or last minute. But it's all really good stuff, I think, and then I'm going to do a book club so that if any classes read the books, there will be times we can go on and I'll be zooming and we can discuss the books. So again, I thought maybe a couple dozen would join. Over 500. It sounds like a good start.
So cool.
But I am always looking for new ways that we can work together, because the thing that Lori said to me, we're not competitors, we're co-conspirators. Well, that co-conspiracy delivers out into the teachers as well and the booksellers. And it's like, I'm always looking for ways that we can work together and help each other. And that's not that, okay, the help I want you to do is I want you to sell my book. I don't believe in that, because the book will sell fine, or it'll do whatever. What I want you to get, I want to help you get kids hooked on books. So whether it's my book or Stuart's books or Christina's book, that's fine because there's enough to go around. Because once we know we've got a reader, well, we know we're that safe harbor for that reader for life, right? And all through middle school and all through high school or all through elementary. And, you want a break, you can go and you can pick up an old friend and pick up the next book in a series, or pick up, he recommends this book. I'm going to try this book by Ruta Sepetys, and wow, this is good. And it just opens them up to a world of reading. And that's really the goal. The goal is not to sell books. The goal is not to have a book turned into a movie. The goal is, I want to write for the rest of my life. That's a personal goal.
That's so cool.
Yeah, that's a good
But
too.
I mostly want kids, young readers, and, I get a fair amount of fan mail from people in their 60s and 70s. I want people to find a love in books. The two great equalizers of the world are books and travel. And books take us on trips when we can't physically go there.
Yeah.
Because when we see and experience emotions and things to other people, it just opens up so much goodness for everything.
That's so cool. Here, Wyatt, do you want to ask this one?
Yeah. For those listeners who are about to pick up your book, what do you hope they walk away with by the last page? What do you hope their students walk away with after reading the Sherlock Society?
That's a great question. There are a lot of, first of all, I want everyone to walk away having enjoyed. I hope you enjoy the book. And enjoyment doesn't mean it changes your life, and enjoyment doesn't mean it sticks with you. Enjoyment means that you thought it was a good investment of time, that you liked it, that you laughed, and maybe you felt other emotions. I'm kind of a big believer that if you write enough funny stuff, you can really sneak in something that makes you cry out of nowhere, because it's like, we're talking about real things here. So I hope there's enjoyment. I'm not big into lessons because I think that there are lessons in books, but we take out from them what we want to think a certain way, and then it's up to, we turn that. I don't like preachy books. I don't like books that try to tell you this is what you've got to do and this is why you've got to do it. But if there's a lesson, if there's a thing, we live in a time when the big movies, a lot of them are about superheroes, and superhero movies are fun, and to be honest, I'm a little tired of them. But superheroes are built on a concept of this person can solve the problems of the world because of this one singular ability they have. So Spider-Man can do what he can do, or Superman can do what he can do. And that's fun. But that doesn't help me if I don't have a singular ability that I feel like is that. But my books are about kids who solve things by working together and by trying to figure them out. And yeah, some of them are really smart, and some of them, though, but they make mistakes and they support each other. And the takeaway is, well, you can figure out a lot if you involve other people, or you can figure out a lot if you pay attention to the little details. So in Framed, the whole idea of the books Framed it's based on a thing called TOAST, the theory of all small things. And I really like Sherlock Holmes movies. Obviously, I named books and plays and whatever. I named the series the Sherlock Society. Obviously, I really like that kind of mystery. But I feel like Sherlock cheats. I feel like if you watch the Benedict Cumberbatch show on television, it's great, but he's going to know something that I don't think people know. Or maybe, because the whole point of the character is there's no one like him. And I wanted with TOAST to be, the idea of TOAST is that if you take all the little details and add them up, they show you the big picture. Theory of all small things. I wanted it to be something that anyone could do. That anyone could do if they took the time to look at the details. Because I believe that's the truth. I believe if we really look at details, we can see a lot. And like Florian says in the book, when people deceive you, when people try to mislead you, they usually do it in big ways. Fake mustache, fake accent are the extremes, but they do it. But ignore the big things sometimes and look at the little things. The little things will often lead you to the truth.
Yeah.
It's cool.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Here's an example of that. Online, people will try to convince you of all kinds of stuff. and that looks realistic, and all that. Wow, it's this big, whatever it is they're trying to tell you. And then you look at their the email address, their web, and it's like all these little. It's like, wait, that's not a real website.
Yeah.
That's someone making it. It's the little thing that they can't fix. They can fool you with the big stuff. They can have the program that makes it look like people are doing, whatever. But the little things are always where you can catch the people.
What were you going to ask, buddy?
How did you come up with toast?
Oh, I so wish I had a good answer to this story.
Oh, no.
I've been asked this question a bunch. So again, toast is the theory, because I knew I wanted to do this. Toast is based on a game I used to play by myself in airports. Because in television, I had to fly all the time, and often I was flying by myself, never with my family because it was a work thing. And so you sit and wait in airports for the connecting flight or whatever. And I started just studying other people. And I play a game which is like, how much can I figure out about someone just by looking at them? Or overhearing just their accent or a little thing. And the thing is, it didn't have to be accurate.
Yeah.
But could I write a whole story based on the shirt? And then I'd go to pick up my son at the airport. And my son went to college in Ohio. And the way the airport in Orlando is, you land in one place, you take a shuttle to a main terminal. So the closest you can get is in the terminal if you don't have a ticket. And so I would wait for him. And I didn't know exactly when his flight would come, but the shuttle would come off and like 100 people would get off. And I learned that you can tell where every airplane was from based on what people wore.
Interesting.
Oh, look, they have a Dodgers hat, and he has a USC hat and a UCLA shirt, and this is from Southern California. All those things line up for Southern California. And so then I'd look for, okay, then what team? So my son went to school in Ohio. When someone comes off and they got there's a couple guys in Bengals jerseys and Ohio State jerseys, I know the plane from Ohio has landed. So I had these games that I would play to try to figure out about people. And I thought, though, I can describe that in a very long, convoluted way like I just did with you. But it would be great if it had a title. Because if it had a name, then there's something to hold on to. And I wished I had a name for it. And I asked myself that, and instantly my brain said, Toast, the theory of all small things.
That's so cool.
And it was right away, and I thought, you will never come up with something better than that. And I wrote it down, and I didn't try to come up with anything different. And everywhere I went, promoting that book on book tours and stuff like that, people would come up with that. Can you do toast? Do you know how to do toast? I thought having a name for it really makes a difference.
Yeah.
And when I moved into this house, unbeknownst to me, the neighbors had kids who were avid readers. They had no idea who I was. And they told each other, let's go use Toast and see if we can figure out who just moved into that house, because they had read the books. And then it turned out that not only had I moved in, but I was the one who came up with Toast, which is how they were using to try to figure out who was here. So cute. And those kids now, they read all my books before I turn them in, and they help catch mistakes in my books, and they're really great. But yeah, so Toast was a great lucky find for me. A funny thing is, because it's an acronym, right? So each letter means a different word. It doesn't translate.
Yeah.
And the books are translated to other languages. So Toast, theory of all small things, does not spell toast in Italian or in French or in Spanish. And so kind of what I told the people who dealt with them is, what I would like is if they just always made it food.
Okay.
And the translators have all gotten into it. And it's always, so like in French, it's gratin. And gratin means cheesy. And so gratin spells some version of the theory of all small things. So that's
really
consistent
cool.
thing.
That's funny. That is really cool. Well, thank you so much for, first of all, just sharing so much and indulging us in all of our conversations, because we geek out about stories.
I hope I rambled. So I apologize for rambling.
No, please don't. We do the same thing.
Yes.
Yes, we do. Will you please tell our listeners where they can find you and your work, and where they can pick up the Sherlock Society and all of your other works?
Okay, sure. So if you want to find me in the online world, jamesponti.com usually has everything you need. Then there's also renegadesofmiddlegrade.com. On Twitter, I still call it Twitter. On Twitter, it is at James Ponti. On Instagram, it's at James Ponti Books. Finally, you can get the books anywhere, hopefully. You should be able to get them anywhere. I'm a big fan of independent bookstores.
Mhm.
I know, I'm a big fan of libraries. Don't want to spend money, get it from the library. That's great. Independent bookstores are great. Barnes & Noble has been great. Barnes & Noble and Sherlock Society actually has a special edition that's only at Barnes & Noble. But, so it has like extra content in it and a different cover. So there's been a lot of great support for that. So I like just supporting all those different venues. Yeah, and just, you can reach out to me. If you email me through my website, I'll try to write back to you. Sometimes I get overwhelmed, and it's not intentional that I don't, but I'll try to. I don't really visit schools anymore, so don't write to ask that because I hate to turn people down.
Yeah, I bet.
And it's just because with the 2 books a year, I just don't have the time. I used to travel a lot and visit schools, so no. But follow me social media for Sherlock Society. I'm doing a 2-week 13 city tour. So I'm going to be at a lot of places, and at all of those places, I'm going to be with amazing authors at each one. So take a look on my website, on my social media, and you'll know where I'm going.
We will try our hardest actually to make it if we can.
Oh,
If it's drivable.
And if you go to Linktree, James Ponti's Linktree, which is also on my Instagram bio, it has places like if you want to join the Sherlock Society, you can click and you can join.
Okay, good. That was going to be my next question.
If you want to pre-order, you can click and you can pre-order.
Okay.
All the different things. And I constantly try to update that with what's coming up.
That's great. Yeah, I was going to say, how can schools join the Sherlock Society? So we will make sure to link all of that in the show notes to this episode. Thank you so much, because I know we've gone a bit over on our promised time. This is so cool. And thank you for letting my co-host for the day, my guest.
What a great co-host. You're a natural.
You did great, bud.
Thank you.
All right. Well, we are going to be talking about this all day long, I'm sure, because I can see it bubbling up in his little head. But thank you again for joining us. This was amazing. We appreciate you. And listeners, head to the show notes because we'll have so many links for you. And thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks again for listening to Brave New Teaching.
We'd love to keep the conversation going over on Instagram.
And while you're there, check out the links in our bio for the most up-to-date events going on in the Brave New Teaching community.
Thanks for being here and have a great week at school.